Thanks, Gary, and thanks to everyone for joining today. It's always good to see you, Gary, and I'm sad that you won't let me talk about fishing and other nonsense, but we should dive right in. This is one of my favorite topics and has been for quite some time, and I love that we have attendees coming from both training traditions and from sales and marketing traditions. You know, one of the things that began to fascinate me about 6 or 7 years ago was that we were seeing this convergence of marketing, energy, practice, customer experience awareness, and more into the world of training and learning. And at the same time, we're starting to see sales and marketing start to bite off more and more of how do we leverage some of this learning stuff. And I think that Adobe kind of embodies that reality. Adobe, if you're not familiar, is certainly one of the world's leader, if not the world's leader, in digital marketing, customer experience kinds of technology, with leadership in things like Test and Target. People often recognize they get their ears perk a little when they hear the holiday reports and find that the data is coming from Adobe. That's because Adobe is knee deep, maybe neck deep, in handling the web's data related to sales and marketing, and has a myriad of technologies around this space. Well, about a decade ago, Adobe worked out a new technology related to training. And from the very inception, we had a lot of understanding that what was going awry with education experiences, training experiences, learning experience, whatever you want to call them. Maybe they're just ways to catch the attention or possible mechanisms to get people who really don't want to do something to do it. That's one way to think of it. Activities that encourage people to know more in the inevitable interest and benefit of your business. And that's really what all of these things sort of come together to represent. So about a decade ago, Adobe started to really revolutionize those technologies. And over the ensuing years, we've refined and honed what's available. And we realized that really there's more than one reason to have engaging experiences, but there are also huge advantages if you have ways to make sure that those experiences maximize engagement with whatever that audience happens to be. So as we explored those things, we realized that there were lots of holes, that people were out there kind of looking for solutions to those problems and piecemealing them together because there wasn't a great solution that solved problems for different audiences. So today I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the evolution of sales and partner enablement, where we are, what kinds of opportunities exist. I'll talk a little bit about Adobe's technology, but I'm not going to obsess over it. We're going to keep things high level today and talk more theoretically about what are the opportunities for us in terms of business. So when I say theoretically, I guess I mean pragmatically. What can we actually do to enhance and improve our businesses and to make the experiences for everybody in that chain much more pleasurable, much more approachable? One of the things that we have been concerned with from the very beginning is opportunities to leverage people's intrinsic motivation. And that motivation runs deep. You know, when I say something like Michelin, what do you guys think? And by the way, we're leaving the chat pod open over here on the right-hand side as we traditionally do. It's a great opportunity for you to kind of just chat right there in the space. Believe it or not, I actually look at what you have to say, and we can even start a conversation, a dialogue. All I ask is that you keep it kind of on track. So I see Cindy says tires. Jennifer says tires. Christy says food, tires, the Michelin brothers, and so on. And I suspect as we continue to get answers here, those answers are all going to be sort of variations of that. But let's pause for a minute and say, holy cow, I mean, we know that Michelin is the Michelin man. We know that Michelin is a tire manufacturing company predominantly. Why did food come up? And Cindy says, I didn't even think of Michelin stars, but that's exactly the point, right? So Michelin is a great example. Starting at the turn of the previous century, Michelin realized that there was a significant opportunity to market to audiences in ways that would improve and enhance their corporate brand identity, in ways that would improve and enhance their approachability to people out in the space, and would give them that kind of name recognition. And the way that they approached it was by creating these maps initially, and then food and restaurant guides. What were they really up to? Well, what they were up to is they were in an authentic way looking at the world around them. At that point, travel was quite a difficult thing to do. And resources about travel, especially reliable resources about travel, were few and far between. And so by providing resources around travel, they were actually aligning to the theme of tires, right? Because if people drive more, they use more tires, right? But it also gives us an opportunity to explore other areas and become known as a value add or a resource for customers that has no cost to the customer, that has no sort of penalty. And Michelin was not alone. You think of early cookbook releases from Jell-O and others. There were many of these sort of turn of the last century innovations in marketing. Now, what they were really doing was creating an authentic channel for reaching an audience. I want you to think for a second. Like when Gary said, oh, Alan may talk about Adobe's product, right? Now, if you're natural and a human, what you probably do in that moment is you kind of throw up a shield, right? No, don't, I'm not here for sales. Don't sell me a thing, right? That is a natural reaction. Now, I want you to think about this. Most of us are directly or indirectly in a sales aligned kind of field, right? So our customers are doing the same thing. They're throwing up a shield to protect them against influence from messages which they may not regard as authentic or sincere. But when we look at paradigms like Michelin and others, we see paradigms where it's an opportunity to get messages out to the customer. Now, in this age where sales is evolving so rapidly, where partners' relationships with sales are expanding, and where everything is digitizing as quickly as humanly possible, we're in a space where ultimately we don't necessarily have anywhere near the level of control over the message about our products that we're delivering to people. And we know that people are throwing up those shields. So providing opportunities to get people at every level, whether they're direct customers, B2B customers, your partners who are in turn then representing your products and services, wherever they happen to be in that whole information flow, making them feel ownership and motivation to message around these ideas is something that has extremely high value, because ultimately that gives the customer a kind of sense of authenticity and believability of the message. Now, we know that that's one of the benefits that can happen when we leverage opportunities like educational experiences, especially if they're experiences that the customer perceives as adding value to them rather than costing them something. So we see a growing number of businesses that are realizing that, oh, wait a minute, we're in, let's say I'm in the agriculture and farm related chemical production space. So I'm in this sort of chemical agricultural space. That is a complex space. And people really need to have a sense of authenticity and trust in the messages they're receiving. But there also is a need for a tremendous amount of education. So we see organizations leaning in and saying, actually, you know what would be cool is if we could set up a kind of a library online or a resource online to help the people who use our products and services use them more effectively. And so the opportunities are increasing to do this kind of indirect but quite authentic marketing to those audiences. Now, that same concept can apply not just in customer education, but in partner education. Because ultimately, for many of us, the challenge is how do we leverage those people that exist in the partner ecosystem space to be able to trust that they're carrying our messages in a way that adds value to customers, that encourages people to purchase our products and solutions, but also encourages people to use those products and services correctly and in a way that's the most beneficial to them. Because when people use our products and services incorrectly, then they're likely to not want to renew or not want to purchase from us again. So, but often our hands are tied, right? So if we are a manufacturer of something and that thing is ultimately sold in retail outlets and we're not the owner of the retail outlet, right? Now we have an army of retail salespeople that we don't directly control and for whose time we are fighting. Because if you think about this let's say we're talking about the hardware, software, technology sector. You've got a limited number of vendors, of retail outlets, but a huge number of different contributors of everything from wireless routers to laptops to speakers to televisions and so on. Every one of those brands is trying to get their information into the minds of those retail personnel. And so you are now in a competition to get your information out into that partner space. And while this is very obvious in the sort of brick and mortar world, it's just as relevant and just as immediately there in the digital space. Sometimes we think of our digital partners and we think, oh, well, they only focus on us. That is very rarely the case. They may not want you to know. They may digitally whitewash everything so that it looks like they don't handle anybody but you. But in the end, they're probably handling an enormous number of different products and services. And so you are competing for their sales personnel's resources as well as partners. So all of these things are absolutely true. Similarly, in a franchisee model, you'll find the same kinds of limitations. So let's look at some stats because, I'm just me. One of the things we know from a 2022 Gartner report, Strategic Roadmap to B2B Digital Selling, is that ultimately 80% of B2B sales interactions are happening over digital channels by 2025. Those are the predictions. And I think that's absolutely legit. That absolutely follows the trend. Now, think about that for a second. Just pause in your mind for a second and think about, let's go back a decade. Ask yourself, did people trust online interactions a decade ago? Were people buying things online a decade ago? No. See, we had this slide toward the kind of digital economy and people making transactions, not just people individually, but whole B2B transactions. But then when the pandemic hit, it accelerated like crazy, right? I mean, just personally, anecdotally, my frequent flyer miles have plummeted. And that's because I no longer have to fly to various locations much of the time, because both sides corporate see that that's a very expensive, unnecessary expense, and that we've found ways to provide technologies that can fill that gap, bridge it effectively, right? That trend is just indicating where we're headed. We're headed to a place where by far the majority of transactions are going to happen online. 50% of all enterprise B2B sales tech will include digital sales rooms, so spaces that are persistent, that allow for some kind of sales interactions to happen, or on-demand, on-call kind of spaces. And if we look at the onset of AI, I mean, 2023 being clearly the AI breakthrough moment, it's entirely reasonable to expect that we'll see housing or staffing of these kind of solutions by AI, but also very much so, they're likely to be staffed by partners. So the subject matter experts, those who become the experts in the space, are very likely to come from your partner space, because you're going to want to leverage your own internal teams for opportunities that are the most significant, right? And those entry level kind of discovery, answering questions, et cetera, those interactions are going to more and more shift to these sort of virtual spaces and welcome centers. Now, 20% of B2B companies will see revenue from multi-experience sales. Multi-experience means that they're coming in to more than one thing to see it at the same time. So people are leveraging that digital solution space to find you here, to find you there, to find you there. 10 years ago, nobody ever asked me, do you have references from the rating services, right? Like Trust Radius and the like. Now, when I go live to an event, it is the most common question. So those kinds of things, people reliant upon digital reporting, having increasing faith in aggregate sites that are gathering stats and so on. This is all because they can leverage more information faster. And then finally, 15% of B2B organizations will use digital commerce platforms for sales by 2024. So this is all just to say that there's a clear trend, that we need our partners more than ever, that we are in an ecosystem where reliance on those partners is everything, but partners continue to be effectively removed or distanced from ownership of our products and services and from understanding and knowledge about the products and services that we have. And that problem then, which was before sort of a problem of, well, we could kind of give them this information, you know, we did a training when we first released something, you know, we've got basic handouts or something. Those pieces, those components are no longer adequate to meet the needs of partners. Partners need their personnel to be able to access information immediately. They need to be able to search that information in real time. They need to be able to upskill themselves on granular aspects of the information, which means they need to leverage a kind of learning space where they can wrap their head around something in the span of a call or in the span of a few minutes before they call a customer back, getting their head around the specifics and the details. And to do that means not only do our educational opportunities need to be extremely appealing, but they need to fall in line with what fundamentally motivates individuals around learning experiences and engagement, right? So we know enough about this to know that there's these four sort of factors that influence how people get engaged. One of those factors is an obstacle. If there's any obstacle at all to being able to access the information, something like technology blocking their access, or something like it's awkward or dense or difficult to understand, all of that will immediately cause the learner, the person, to walk away. And then the other part of it is that people need to have a clear sense of purpose. If I engage in this activity that you've given me, what will the benefit be to me? And they generally want it in those terms. So if I engage in this activity about your product and service, what will I get out of it? And generally speaking, what they want is they want to increase their own individual performance. They want to improve or enhance their team's performance, or they want to feel like what they've learned adds value to them as a whole. And those are big elements around purpose. The other thing that they want is autonomy. They don't want you to demand anything of them. And in most cases with partners, you don't have the power to do that anyway, because they wouldn't be called partners if they work directly for you, right? So they don't work directly for you, and they probably don't obey you when you send commands. Instead, you have to send them opportunities and entice them into those opportunities. And then finally, mastery is always and will continue to be a really important aspect. And so it's important to people in that partner space, as well as people in traditional learning environments, as well as customers and so on. It's important to whomever that they have a sense of that their mastery is being honored and celebrated. And that's where things like gamification, social learning, and so on begin to play a really significant role. All right. I'm just pausing for a sec to see if we've got some new chat in the chat pod. Looks like Cindy says, so relevant to the software industry. We never think about our partners promoting other products. That's absolutely relevant in the software industry. And I think it's relevant across really a wide variety of industries. Find that this sort of thing is true. I remember having a conversation with a major makeup manufacturing company about 4 years ago. And they were telling me about how they were using marketing tools, so marketing front ends, web CMS, and all that kind of thing. They were using marketing tools to try to educate their representatives who were indirect partners embedded in stores who were then in turn trying to educate customers. And so they could see a clear ecosystem. They needed educational materials, probably in the forms of YouTube videos and things like that, to help people learn to put on their makeup more effectively, to use their face creams more effectively, and so on, right? And you can see it, makeup's a great example because you can see so clearly if you're bad at putting it on, it does not deliver the promise that the manufacturer had, right? And so now think about that in terms of the tiers that they're dealing with. They have those people who are at the top sort of crafting messaging for advertising and conventional marketing. But now bring it on down, you're inside a retail store and someone is there actually working at the counter with someone who's come up to learn more about makeup at the counter. Because that's really why people sit down at a makeup counter. Yes, they want to kind of see the latest stuff, but they also want to learn, how can I do this more effectively? How can I be better at this? And so their desire became to train the personnel in the stores, partners, who were in turn then going to be talking directly to customers and to provide an array of educational materials that would meet the needs of everybody in that chain. And that array of materials becomes very mobile friendly, very social friendly, very all those other kinds of things all at once. And you can see that's just echoing what we know already, which is that these digital sales related ecosystems are evolving rapidly, and that ultimately the way people access information is going to be much more reliant upon digital delivery than it has been in the past. So here from a Brandon Hall study in 2021, this study looked at the HCM outlook, and sales effectiveness was identified as the #2 business priority for organizations. Now I'm just going to dangerously synonymize sales effectiveness with sales engagement, but I'll justify why I'm doing that. Because ultimately, when we engage with the personnel that we're going to be doing this sort of thing with, for the purpose of providing educational materials for their benefit, for their learning, and so on, that ultimately is the mechanism by which sales effectiveness occurs, right? There's not much in the way of like external forces. We can't just push money upon it to make it more effective sales, right? Ultimately, people will be more effective with sales when they know more about sales processes, products, services, and so on. So all of these things are aligned. But it's important to note that as we look at what the industry is telling us about what's important, this is the #2 item in terms of importance. Now, that means that we need more opportunities to train teams, but we're almost never going to see those opportunities occur like this in the future. It's very rare that we'll get everybody gathered around and sitting, in the common room and listening to a dynamic speaker going crazy. What is far more likely is that we're going to have opportunities to reach those people, but it's going to be time gapped. It's going to be pre-recorded. It's going to be asynchronous. It's going to be learning which is indirect, and we'll have no supervisory mechanism with which to have those engagements. And then we're dependent upon how interesting is it? How engaging is it? How much does it meet the needs of the learners in question, including how much does it motivate them? So how do they feel about it overall? So when we think about that, the role of enablement in sales effectiveness, and I'm going to do, Gary and I talked about this earlier, I'm going to switch my camera off now for just a little while, because by now you should be like thinking, what are those things in the background, and kind of picking through them. So I've gone from being interesting to watch to a distraction. So I'll go ahead and switch that off, and just reinforce what I was just saying, that these roles are evolving. They're very much landing in this partner space in terms of expectations. So if you think about it, we're now responsible for being more a curator of best practices, because we have to get the messaging out to partners in ways that they can leverage it to most effectively handle their ultimate goal, which is sales. We have to provide them with simplified information streams so that things are not overly technical, because their need to consume is to consume something that is ultimately easier to access and much more straightforward. And they're going to act as subject matter experts. So I'm noticing that Christy says 100% agree with Cindy. I'm also software, and all of what Alan's presented. Oh, that's so nice. You guys are so sweet. Okay. So, and then Annie says, I like what you said about being dense as well. We have 14 different products, software as well, which is difficult and dense to educate on. That's absolutely something that I hear all the time. In fact, one of the specific use cases that I'll talk to you about toward the end today is with a manufacturer of graphics hardware. And they especially have this problem like nobody I've ever seen. They're one step away from chip manufacturing, right? And in fact, arguably it is chip manufacturing, it's just for graphics. So that's so dense and so difficult to navigate. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it as we go on, but the nutshell is they were able to get down to basics. Like, what is the impact on the customer? Oh, these videos run faster, these games run faster, and use the technology to integrate technologies that allow the sales training to include real-time evidence of those kinds of differences. And that was high impact, right? Because then their partners were like, I not only do I know this because I learned it in text, but I know it because I experienced it. I saw it. I believe it. I'm going to preach it, right? And they saw a substantial improvement in that kind of representation and ownership when that partner down the line was talking to a customer, because they absolutely embraced and believed what they had been shown, and not shown in terms of like numbers and stats, but what they had been shown in manifestations like really fast, cool gameplay and stuff like that, right? So some great examples here, ways that companies are thinking outside the box and are really expanding their ability to educate partners. And that kind of concept of simplification, et cetera, is at the core. When we think about the need for sales and partner enablement, think about how frequently you need new information just to keep up. I like to think about, if you want to think about AI, that's a great example, right? Like the pace of AI is astonishing. I think almost every day you have to read the latest headlines to even have a clue what's happening. And I think that that's true of most of our products and services. I had great conversations with some major industry stalwarts over the last couple of years, and they were telling me that they have to produce new educational materials, support materials for these groups in the range of one every quarter of basically the same content, because there's that much changed in just 3 months period. I had one company that told me that 30-day lifespan on a piece of content was not atypical. And that is astonishing. We come from a world where often these kinds of pieces of content were developed once and then ignored for years at a time. We want to keep those partners with hands-on with the products and practices and transform them into the experts, the real experts in the field. So this one from Brandon Hall 2020 study called Extended Enterprise Learning Study deals with how the outcomes also suggest that there's a substantial impact of doing this kind of additional education, training, enablement, whatever you want to call it, with those sales teams. 74% say it improved customer relations, 67% increased awareness, 55% increased sales, 15% said that it maximized client retention, and there was about a 15% association with generating revenue. So you're not going to win the boardroom fight over direct revenue generation here, but you're definitely going to find that your CSAT scores and your overall customer brand appreciation and awareness, those things are going to climb in the wake of this kind of approach. Cool. Doing some quick clock checking just to make sure that Gary will tell you that I'm notorious for going too long, so I'm trying to behave.
I will.
So what kind of challenges do we face inside this space? Well, according to that same Brandon Hall study, 37% said that the challenges include lack of insights into external groups. In other words, you can create the training, you can make it available to the people in the other groups, but all too often the architecture, the architecture by which we deliver this falls short and does not allow us to measure what's happening in those external groups. And part of that is because sometimes there are legal issues, like you can't gain access to information about individual employees and so on. But you know, what we've found is that by implementing the technology in a way that data can be aggregate reported back up the chain, we provide great opportunities for you to know whether something is effective, even without breaching legal and technical agreements. 63% identified something similar here by saying it's difficult to measure the effectiveness. That really drills down to, I had an individual activity or exercise, I made it available to people, but I don't have any information back from that about whether or not that had an impact on that person down the line. Still difficult to measure that because you're not going to get sales data likely from a partner, but there are aspects that you can understand certainly about skills, etc. And you generally can get some general comparisons of sales performance aligned to product or topic and so on. Content development is a significant problem. It often is expensive and takes a lot of extra effort. We're at Adobe, we're super excited about the new version of Adobe Captivate that's coming out this summer, which will radically reduce the amount of time it takes to produce content. And it, you know, one of the things that I hear over and over again from people is that ultimately we do have that challenge of producing content as quickly as humanly possible. So folks want more of their team to be able to produce content which is valid, sound, delivers results in terms of reporting, can be relied upon, and you can iterate on it to determine how effective it is. It's that moment that I will also just mention that we will be, Priyanka asked me to mention that we will be at in San Diego at, where are we going to be?
TechLearn. The TechLearn.
Is that where we are?
Well, no. That's our conference. Your conference apparently is in San Diego, according to you.
Oh no, it's not in San Diego. It's in Vegas. Oh, that's what you.
Yeah. Well, here I have a link for that. Here you go.
We're having Adobe Learning Summit in Las Vegas at
links in the chat. The link is in the chat. If only we had some just-in-time training to fill us in on this in a hurry.
That's exactly right. It's an amazing experience. If you haven't gone to an Adobe Learning Summit, it's super fun. So we encourage you to check that out, and you can learn more about all of Adobe's products and services at Adobe Learning Summit, and also a lot about things like marketing to various audiences, partner training, all of those kind of cool things. Cool. Excellent. Pounding right along. So another problem that folks identified related to this is that because of the nature of so many different media forms and so many different social spaces and so many different outlets, it can become a very scattered experience, right? If you have people who are developing, you know, documents on SharePoint, and you've got websites, and you've got peer learning and things like that, it can become sort of spread out all over. So it's not easy to access. It's difficult to find and rediscover after the fact. Where's that thing that I learned that idea from? Now I can't remember. Everything from YouTube videos to in-person training, all of these things are potentially delivering the experience. But because they're so scattered and they're not universally linked, people end up feeling like they are overwhelmed with information they can't gain access to, or they can't regain access to. And that's a good point to kind of just let you know a little bit about Adobe's technology, which allows you to aggregate all of those things under one common hood, allows you to provide easy access in multiple portals. And so the Adobe Learning Manager is great at providing that way to kind of bring things together, including aggregation of content that may include things like live courses and scheduling of those courses, and things like online information, and even YouTube videos and other kinds of content, social learning, and so on. So when we look at sales training, effective sales training, one handy way to sort of look at this is you can have good sales training and you can have great sales training. If you think about it, training on multiple skills, that's good. but specific learning journeys that are crafted to help individuals improve their skills are great. You could have training which is sort of supported by sales leaders. In other words, that they're saying, yes, go check out this sales leadership piece. But you also could have training that's owned by sales leaders. In other words, training that is something that sales leadership is invested in, is making decisions about, is guiding, and is designing in order to maximize the overall output. And that means things like having reporting that's aimed at sales leadership. That means having accountability and information and even the ability to assign materials specific to teams and learners and so on that are, that are crafted and owned by sales leadership. On the good side, it could be driven by high quality off the shelf content. On the great side, could be custom tailored content based on your individual sales motions inside your organization right now. On the good side, maybe it happens once a year, you've got an exercise. On the great side, continuous effort. Because when you do that sort of training, upskilling, et cetera, on an annual basis, what you're really telling them is that that's good, you're done. You don't need to learn anything until next year. And that's just not modern business. It absolutely is not, especially in the digital space. Measured on training completion, that's good, but measured based on sales impact is great. And those things give you an opportunity to really kind of pound it out and have a much more interesting kind of opportunity. Cindy asks, are the journeys based on personas? They absolutely can be. You can set up the learning journeys based on group membership, and inside of Adobe's tech, that means any group that you define under any purpose. So it could be personas that are aligned to job role, could be personas that are aligned to sales responsibility, could be personas that are based on geos, could be a crossover of those things and more. So really there are no limits to the ways that you can align those learning journeys and set them up. And then in terms of how you design them and build them, that also becomes a part of your planning, right? Like where do you feel that they need to differentiate in order to be the most effective deliverable? So, yep, checking my clock, looking good. In terms of Adobe's focus, what Adobe has done is created core capabilities that include things like AI-driven recommendation. So in the Adobe world, we have a recommendation engine which allows us to deliver recommendations based on personas, based on group membership, and so on, that leverage information like what's the skill or the content of this course, who is this person, how do they align to other people in the organization or similar parallel organizations. And then Adobe's Sensei, which is an AI-driven engine, delivers recommendations specifically and surfaces that content up to people based on those experiences. And we find that this is really, really beneficial because it's a quick way to understand who that person is and how they can most effectively leverage the information that they need. Also, Adobe obviously delivers seamless learning journeys and the ability to craft and customize those learning journeys, even make decisions based on the performance of the learner inside of that experience. Actionable insights. These are powerful ways to be able to deliver information, reporting information, but not just raw data, instead information which is linked directly to actions that leadership can take in order to improve the outcomes. So providing leaders with dashboards that help with things like compliance awareness and more, and that provide them one-click access to remind a learner, to encourage a learner, to challenge a learner to do something else based on what they're discovering from the data. Enterprise integrations has been a huge differentiator for Adobe in that all of these technologies are woven together so that it's very easy to be able to grab libraries of content from different fields, different industries, and leverage those effectively within the technology. Likewise, it's easy to integrate Adobe's various technologies, everything from Adobe Learning Manager to Adobe Experience Manager, which is all the web front end and CMS kind of related content, can all be integrated. So if you want an incredibly customized solution, which weaves seamlessly directly into, for example, your partner-facing website that already exists, this technology actually allows you to just drag and drop these interactive learning components and elements directly into your web CMS, especially and most easily if you're using Adobe Experience Manager and the technology stack aligned to marketing. Likewise, gamification and social interactions that allow you to hyper-motivate the people that you're working with, make sure that they're on board and engaged. Those are all a part of the solution as well. Now, I wanted to talk briefly about some of the customer use cases that we've seen that have been particularly good examples of this kind of solution. So Domino's has been using Adobe worldwide. Domino's has franchisees all around the globe. They are not owned by Domino's. They're owned by a variety of everything from small individuals to large conglomerates that own many, many Domino's outlets. And their challenge really was that education and training had become very disparate and very inconsistent because there was no sort of single or solitary way to deliver all this content. But they also had a lot of contributors, a lot of people who were developing information, educational information that really had value. So by leveraging their franchisee ecosystem and providing everyone with their own instance so that they could then draft courses and content from corporate, but also so that they had power to push content back up if they wanted to, they were able to get an umbrella that allowed them to have detailed reporting of all of that franchisee behavior, but also gave them opportunities to share the experiences and the kind of insights that were growing from below. So they gave themselves a kind of a bottom-up, top-down kind of overall presentation, which is a really great way to do it. Another interesting one to look at here, I mentioned earlier, this is a global manufacturer of graphics chips. They rank in the top Fortune 10 companies across the world. And they are the one that did that little piece that I was telling you about where they really needed to implement a solution for in-store representatives who are effectively downline partners, which would allow them to train this highly dense information very easily and would allow them to build support and enthusiasm for these kinds of experiences. So this organization leveraged Adobe's tech to be able to create new embedded solutions that allowed them to have everything from gameplay to video included as a part of the overall experiences and activities, making it a cool kind of solution for people that kept those eyes on the ball. And then finally, there's another large technology giant, ranked one of the world's top 5 companies in the world, which also leverage these kind of systems. In some ways, they're a company which is near in that technology space to the graphics solution, but this company focuses on a wider variety of hardware and software kinds of solutions. And what they found was that they could leverage gamification, badges, and other solutions, everything from social to gamification and more, and the ability to pump out mobile content and really rapidly deploy information about their whole stack of technologies, everything from software to hardware, by making it available and present through a kind of universal standardized portal. This portal allows people from hundreds of different organizational partners to bring in their personnel and have those personnel effectively leverage all those experiences, but also gives this company the ability to see the data, leverage it, and ultimately achieve their overall goals and do so well. So with that, I will toss for questions. Gary, do we have some questions?
We don't have any that you haven't answered already. We go back to Cindy's question about personas, but we welcome any questions that might come along right now. So put them in the chat, folks. Alan will be glad. Well, Alan, what do you get asked most often?
I think we're at an interesting time. So the shift from traditional learning kind of learning management to a more marketing, sales, et cetera, integrated solution, I think leads to a lot of confusion for people, because they say, okay, well, does this mean I can't use this for internal training? No, that what Adobe's done here is actually set it up so that, depending on what your needs are, you can create that instance to focus on internal training. You can create that instance to focus on onboarding. You can create that instance to focus on handling marketing and individualized marketing, even integrated with our most advanced marketing tools for any audience, whether that's your own internal employees or whether it's partners, whether it's franchisees, whether it's direct customers. So the power becomes really important part of it. And so I think for folks, that maybe is the part that can be a little surprising to wrap your head around, is that the architecture is open enough and the plots that we've mapped through for different organizations are clear enough that we can very quickly help people get to where they need to get and don't have to get too hung up on sort of traditional expectations.
Okay. And then one of the people sent me a private chat and asked, what about advances in, say, generative AI, ChatGPT and the like? Is that going to somehow affect how we are using and where we're going here in the near and
I think they definitely will. I mean, as we hit, I proclaimed without fear that 2023 was the year of AI. I'm absolutely convinced that I was right. And we've seen it's not just generative AI images, it's also audio being generated and augmented by AI. And we're seeing such a massive host of companies that are discovering, oh, we can do this one special thing that people desperately need. So I think your problem with AI will likely, initially people are like, oh no, it's going to take over the world. I think now people are going to be like, oh, wow, we have a lot of AI subscriptions. Can we aggregate some of these? Adobe, for example, has a generative AI application, which is free out there, called Firefly. And Adobe developed a bunch of technology around audio and creating audio based on small sound samples and things like that. So everybody's in this space. And I think that we're finding there are huge opportunities. I would say that if 2023 is the year of AI, I'm going to make a wild prediction and tell you that by 2025, I don't think that language translation or captioning will be much of an issue anymore. That by that point, yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were putting up your.
Yeah, we should be looking at. I mean, we already have some fundamental solutions, but they haven't completely crossed all languages. I think we'll very rapidly get to the point where it won't matter if your speaker is speaking English. You'll be able to have someone come in and in a completely different language and get real-time closed caption that's extremely accurate for whatever their language is, and possibly even turn on an audio translation, which will convert what your speaker is saying into their language.
So I actually saw an article this morning that said the age of generative AI is already over. Because it's going to be so ubiquitous that it's already going to be expected everywhere. It's going to be ever present, and so we're going to be moving on from it. And in some ways we already are, or as you just described. Hey, Bonnie's got a question for us. She says, training and professional development compete for time with everything else. Are people struggling to find time for it? And are administrators having difficulty getting learners to engage?
Absolutely. So, Bonnie, it doesn't matter whether it's our partners, our customers, or our internal employees. People are overwhelmed. And the only piece of advice that I can give you there that really does resonate no matter what is, if you think about what motivates learners, autonomy is critical. And ultimately, if you have autonomy in place for them, they will find time for those experiences as long as the experiences are delivering value. So focus on, is this great value for the person who's going to consume it? That's item number one. And item number two is, do they have choices about when and how to receive these activities, messages, training experiences, and so on? Once that is the case, you will find that people will be very open to it, and they'll grab it. So just as people are saying, oh, we have less time than ever, they're also very willing to engage digitally and virtually. In fact, some employers are finding the opposite, right? That they're saying, oh, we are worried that our employees are spending too much time off their work, off hours, doing trainings or having learning experiences or things like that. So you do want to help them keep a work-life balance, but at the same time, you should be aware that if it's engaging, if it's interesting, if it's adding value to them, they'll spend the time on it, as long as there aren't serious obstacles, as long as it's gives them a sense of choice. Don't assign it to them. If you can get them to opt in, that's always going to be a better outcome.
Great. Well, Alan, we're about at the top of the hour. I have to congratulate you because we have actually kept within our time limit, and glad to have done that. Congratulations. Right. I have put you back on the screen in case people do want to start to wonder about the things that are behind you on your wall and so forth. Right.
Amazing succulents.
Do you have some succulents back there? I can't see.
I do, but Gary, they're all fake. They were real. They were real succulents. Unfortunately, our house got a kitten, and that was the end of my real succulents. They had to go out to the yard, and so now they live out in the yard, and these lovely plastic succulents live here. That's everything else is absolutely real back there.
Does the kitten chew on the succulents or on the fake succulents?
Not the fake ones. No.
Oh.
He just ignores them. He's calm around the fake ones. The real ones, he absolutely chewed to smithereens. Yeah.
You could paint something bitter onto the succulents, on your jade plants and so forth, if you wanted to bring them back inside.
That's an idea I hadn't thought about. But there are so many succulents in the yard anyway, and they do well in this climate. So I think it's all good.
So underneath where you are on the screen, I put up a small poll there asking people, what's the best or most useful idea you learned from Alan today? And I love the comments because, first of all, nobody's put thank you in there because that's not a new idea that you learned from Alan. But I love the idea also that the kittens and succulents made the list. And factors of engagement. I invite everybody to please go ahead and list anything else that you thought was valuable from Alan. It helps other people who are wondering, should I watch this, the recording of this event? And they'll be able to gauge from your comments whether they'll gain something that would be helpful to them. So please go ahead and put those there. I'm going to change the screen a little bit, and I'm also going to help you visit the site that Alan was talking about a little bit earlier. And that's the Adobe Learning Summit 2023 in Vegas at the Mirage. Hope you can join us there. Alan, I will be there. So I'll be looking forward to this. Yeah, I haven't seen you in quite a while. Yes.
That's awesome. It'll be good to see you.
I'm going to travel, whether it takes wheelchairs or whatever. I'll be there. Lori and I have decided. Marcella, what do you have to say there? Oh, thank you. Good. Well, I hope this has been informative to everybody. I want to thank Alan Partridge for making it here today. It was quite a squeeze for him, but Alan, you finally you were able to, and we appreciate all the extra effort that took. And we want to thank Adobe Learning Manager for sponsoring today's event and making it possible. We have some additional webinars on ALM, or not just about ALM itself, but other topics coming up over the next few months. So I hope you can make it for those two. Watch your SMM calendar and just go to smmconnect.com and you'll click on the calendar there. And of course, open every email I send you and you'll know all about that and all the webinars at Training Mag Network too. So Noel and Magoy and Lori and everybody else who has learned an idea from Alan today, please go ahead and list those ideas in the poll there underneath the chat there on the right-hand side of the screen. Alan, thank you so much. Closing words that you'd like to leave us with? Anything profound that you'd like us to be pondering as we go through our day?
You know, Earth Day was Saturday. If you didn't get out on Saturday, it's a good excuse to get out today. Go outside and see the world. What a beautiful day it'll be.
It's glorious. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Thanks again to Adobe and to Dr. Alan Partridge. We'll see you next time. Take care.